Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining. Today, we're going to cover reporting for intermediate users. My name is Paul Treese. I am a supervisor in the Customer Support Engineering Department. I was a user of Alteryx for 3 years before coming on board here. I've been here just under 5 years, so next year will be 5 years. My use case comes from real estate and market development, so I have been using reporting tools and mapping and modeling for a number of years. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and get into the material. Again, we're covering a little bit more advanced reporting functionality, and we'll take a look at what we have to show you in just a second. So first thing I'd like to talk about is upcoming trainings, what else we have on the agenda where you can build your skills and develop your skills in other areas. We'll talk about the workflow that we're going to build today, and how to approach some of these reporting tools, some good rules of thumb, and then where you can go for ongoing support. So today we have the reporting for intermediate users. Coming up in a week, we have data blending and then introduction to building macros. If you've never built a macro before, you find yourself using the same set of 4 or 5 tools to prep a certain data set a certain way all the time, then it's a great way to get in there and consolidate those tools into a single tool that you can just drop in and save yourself some time. And as always, you can visit the community, go to Academy, the Academy link on the left-hand panel, and check out live training for past trainings and whatever's coming up in the hopper. So that's a good segue into the Alteryx community. Feel free to check out the community whenever you have any questions or want to see if your question has been asked and subsequently answered before on the community. You can check out lots of great blog posts by our developers and engineers. You can see knowledge base articles that are written about the product and features therein. And it's a great place to just kind of get to know other power users, other new users. You'll notice there's a lot of if you spend enough time in the community, you start to recognize names. They come up a lot, and you can make those connections there. Also, we have an idea center. I've referred to this as not a dusty old idea box or comments box, that you might see at a grocery store or something that says, give us your ideas, and nobody ever checks it. This is a very interactive portion of our site. Our developers are constantly looking in there for new ideas and updating people on the status of their idea. So if something has gained traction and it suddenly becomes a part of our roadmap, you'll see those changes being made to the post there. Of course, everybody likes badges, and we have some awesome badges as you move your way through the community and completing different tasks and just being a part of it. And then, of course, you can share your knowledge. We have a great user base, and you all come up with really interesting use cases, some that even I've never even seen before, and I've been doing this for a while. So, community is a great place, community.alteryx.com. So a little bit of background for today's training. What we're going to do is take a look at a static report use case. So in this case, something that needs to be reported every week. We're going to be looking at some metrics in this data, like monthly percent of sales, store locations, total monthly sales for the top 5 performers, and it all needs to be visually represented. Now, in the case of this particular training, we're going to try to fit this into an hour. So you'll notice that the end report is going to look a little bit rudimentary, and that's fine because the key here is to understand how all of these tools work together. And I'll kind of show you an example. I'll show you before we even start what we're going for in terms of the report that we're going to build today. And then I'm going to show you something that I've built that is an example of kind of where you can go with it when you spend a little bit more time kind of fine-tuning some of your display. The goal is to create this workflow and automate it. And what we'll be doing is consuming the data and representing it in terms of tables, charts, and maps. And I will show you. Bear with me just a moment. So this is what we're going for today. This is actually right here. This is the store report. And you'll see we have charts, tables, map, header, all this great information. And there's a lot of little techniques that I'm going to show you. But the key thing that I want to kind of talk about here, just showing you this here, is that when you approach reporting tools, you want to think of your objective in terms of the page that you're trying to output to. So what I often do is I'll take a sheet of paper and I will by hand roughly sketch out where I want different components of my final report to be. So I kind of design it before I approach Alteryx. And that just gives me that framework that I need in my head before I approach the actual development. Now I'll show you something that I've built, which is a little bit more advanced. And it kind of gives you that idea that, yeah, you can really put something together that has a fair amount of polish on it. You have your variables listed in a nice, concise table. You've got a nice table horizontally here that contains the information you need. And then a map. So let's go back to our PowerPoint here. There we go. Okay, so some things that we're going to cover. Creating report snippets. You'll find that we use that particular vocabulary word when we refer to reporting objects. So going through the workflow, you'll do all of your data prep, which is an important thing to note. Whenever you're doing reporting in Alteryx, you want to make sure that you've completed all of your analytics. So you're now at the point where you have completed, processed data that's now ready to be transformed onto a page. Because once you send your work, your table, your raw data through a reporting tool, it gets converted into what we call a report snippet. So you may have a table of 7 or 8 fields, maybe it's 40, 50 rows. You put that into a table tool, and the output is going to be a single report snippet. And then we're going to want to arrange those report snippets on a page. And then we're going to render the completed reports. And render is simply just a fancy word for the outputting of reports in Alteryx. So anytime you have reporting tools, if you're going to output them to a PDF, to an Excel, to a Word document, to a PowerPoint, any of those things, you're going to do that through the render tool. Just a little brief overview of the tools that we're going to be dealing with. We've got the chart, the table tool, the text tool, the layout tool, overlay, which is really important, the map tool, and the render. Okay. So the chart tool is what you would expect. It's the tool that allows you to chart your data. Now, it gives you a variety of different choices in which to display your data. So you've got your column, bar, pie, line, combination. There's lots of different choices here, and this is where you'll go to make that choice. You have the option to run 2 axes, so your 2 y-axes can be labeled if you're looking for kind of that dual axis option. We can turn grid lines on and off. We can configure your right and left axes. You can label and provide prefixes and suffixes for your data. There's a lot of functionality in here. And so what I tell people when they approach this tool and the report map tool is really just leave no tab unchecked, leave no setting unconfigured, because there's a lot of different ways that you can approach the way you want your map or your chart to look, and it kind of depends on your individual needs. So it's worthwhile to kind of check through all of these options. You may decide you don't want a legend because your data is relatively straightforward. You may decide you do want a legend, but you want it displayed in a separate field or in a particular way, or however it is that you want to approach your data. It's just important to kind of check through all of these different options and come up with your own personalized interpretation of how you want your data to appear. And then, of course, there's the grouping function. For those of you who are not familiar with the grouping function, it is kind of key to producing reports in batch form. So if we want to approach your workflow and say, like I said before, the description of a table that has 7 or 8 columns and let's say 100 rows. But in reality, those 100 rows represent 10 different stores. So in the end of your workflow, you want to have one report for each store. So you have 10 stores with 10 records associated with them. That's 10 groups. So when you choose that grouping field, you're going to group by the store number. And what that's going to do is it will give the chart tool will now give you one record per store with one report snippet for each store. And that's important to know because as you're going through your workflow, you're going to use that grouping field to join with other components of your reports that are also grouped. So if I map those 10 stores and I get one map per store, I will get again 10 records with the store number as a column, and then a column that has the report snippet for the map associated with each one of those store numbers. Now I can join by that store number and get those report snippets all on the same row. So I'll have one row for store 101, I'll have the map, and I'll have the chart all on the same row. And then I can go into using layout tools, etc. This will make a little bit more sense if you're confused as we move into the actual development phase of this. Table tool, similar thing. What you're doing is you're taking your raw data from Alteryx, you're putting it into the table tool where you're going to give it some configuration. You can set specific widths. Again, you can group by. You could even add a new column that will present a little bar graph based on a particular variable. And then you can, it has a little bit of a select functionality here. So you can choose to turn on or off different columns as they're necessary. Now, the reason that you wouldn't put a select tool before the table tool and get rid of all the data that you don't want to see in your final report is that you may actually have some columns in here that contain data that may be relevant to color coding the data that you want to keep. So you would do that by setting column rules or row rules. And when you do that, you can reference a column. So for instance, if January, say this is sales data, and January sales data is greater than 50,000, we may set a row rule that says, if January data is greater than 50,000, we want to make the entire row red. However, or green, let's say, because 50,000 is our benchmark and we want to go north of that. So if it's greater than 50,000, we'll make the whole row green. Then we would set that here, but we would just uncheck this because it's not relevant to our display. Okay. Again, you can set justification. You can add prefixes to your data. So if it's a currency, you can add a dollar sign or the pound sign or the euro sign or whatever it is you want to add. If it's a numeric value, you can add decimal places. There's a lot of different things that you can use to play around here. Now, sometimes it may be that you have headers in your data, and you don't necessarily want them to appear the way they appear here. You can simply rename the field. You can do title case or just capital N, AME. You can change that here. If you just don't want to see this title at all, this field header at all, you can come over here and you can just put a space in there, and it will replace this header with a space. So from a reporting perspective, once you get your final report, it will just be blank. just make sure we covered all of these things, and it looks pretty much like we did. So yeah, we'll move on to the report text tool. Now this is a really handy tool to have around, especially when it comes to creating your own headers. So I noticed that somebody had asked the question during the on the post for this training about how to go about using headers and footers. Commonly, if I'm going to build something that is more complex than what you can do with the Alteryx header and footer tools, which are designed for pretty simplistic purposes to get a fairly basic header and footer in your data, I would choose to create one in this report text tool. And that's what you actually see here in the screenshot, and you'll see it again when we build this workflow. And what I'll do is I'll create a new field for this text. So I'll click this radio button. I have the option to create some text and add it to an existing report snippet. So if I have a map and I want to create a title, I can just create a nice little title in this box and format it however I like and say attach to the map field. And what you'll find is that you have now the map and the text that I created here together in one snippet. But in most cases, I use the default, which is create a new field for this text. Just gives me a brand new field, plops this report snippet in there. It's a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So you can feel free to add information in here however you'd like. You can add images, you can add links, you can add available fields. So this tool is great because it's a tool that can stand alone. And you can write whatever you want in here, and you can pass data out of it. But it also has an input anchor, which means I can provide it raw data, and I can say, I can create a header that says sample report for store, and then I can put a colon, and then I can choose available fields, and I'll choose store number, and it will create one report, as I was telling you before for group by. It will create one report text snippet for each store that was provided to it. So it's kind of a grouping function without actually setting grouping functions in the tool. It's controlled by the data that's coming into it. And then, yeah, you can format all you want with your text. You can give it a background color. You can change the text color. You can do pretty much anything you want in terms of basic text functionality. The report map tool, if I can get those words out, is a visualization tool that we use for geospatial data. So if you have a GIS background, Geographic Information Systems background, if you've ever worked with MapInfo or ArcMap from Esri, you'll be able to wrap your brain around this relatively quickly. If you do not have that experience, again, we'll go over some of this configuration, and it should make some more sense. Again, like the charting tool, it has a lot of functionality, so you're kind of encouraged to play around with it as things go on. You have to have spatial data, so you'll have a spatial object field in Alteryx. It will contain either points, lines, or polygons. This tool can take multiple data streams. So if you have points going in here, you'd have one data stream from your stores layer. Maybe you have a trade area layer that's going to come in here as a separate data stream. So you can bring those all in together and to be consumed by this tool and displayed using the Data and Layers tab. Again, you do have the grouping function to produce one map per store. As we've been to continue using that example, thematic mapping. Thematic mapping is a term that not necessarily everybody knows. Sometimes it's commonly referred to as heat mapping, which is kind of a misnomer. In the geospatial world, so I come from a geospatial background. So in the geospatial world, a heat map is typically referred to as something that would be raster. So you'd have a grid that would then be color-coded based on proximity to hot points. Whereas what we're doing and what a lot of people are doing when they refer to a heat map is some geographic boundary. So it could be a heat map of the state of Texas, and it would be the counties of Texas as displayed by their median household income. And so you've got a color code, you've got a color ramp based on median household income, lower being red and higher, let's say, being green. It fits that criteria of, you know, some look better, some look higher, some look lower, but it's not truly a heat map because it's actually irregularly shaped geographic areas. Again, you can zoom in and out for the map extent. So what this is saying is it wants to go, the minimum extent of the map is going to be 0.5 miles. So if you just have a single point that you're displaying, the map is going to default to looking at an area from end to end that's half a mile, plus 60%. So I can't do that kind of mental math in my head, but it's going to give you a little bit of a buffer beyond that. And you can increase or decrease that accordingly, depending upon how much data you want to show or how much map you want to show. Okay. The overlay tool. This is a really important tool, and we're going to get into this too with the map tool. The reporting tool, or the overlay tool, allows you to set a base field. So this is going to be the bottommost layer, and it's going to let you take other report snippets and put them on top. So for basic cartographic standards, it's typical to put the legend on the map as opposed to off to the side, which creates a funky little tail to the side and creates a bunch of negative space above it or below it, depending upon where you position it. If you put the legend on the map, now you have a nice rectangle with all the relevant data on the map itself. This can be used for any number of different use cases where you want to stack a report snippet on top of another one. The layout tool, which we'll get into as well, this is the glue that holds everything together. This is where you start to take your report snippets that are all kind of floating in the wind. So if you've imagine taking a piece of paper and cutting out every single one of your components of your report. So you've got your header component, you've got each of your charts separately cut out, and your map. This is the tool that allows you to start taping them together. And then the layout tool, what it allows you to do is horizontally align. So this chart and this map are horizontally aligned. So you take those two and you put them together horizontally first to create that rectangle that is in line with the rest of your objects. Well, now that you have all these report snippets that are horizontally, are prepared to be put together vertically, you can now put another layout tool to align them vertically. It's important to note that in order to access all of these fields, they have to be, or all of these report snippets, they have to all be in the same row. This is especially relevant when you're talking about the example that we've done with stores, where you have grouping. So store 101 would be this row, and it needs to have all of these components together in the same row. Okay. You can see what we're talking about, layout horizontally. And the output, so you're actually going to connect, you're going to join these two together, so they'll be in the same row. And then you take that and put it into the layout tool, where you join horizontally. And the output, you're no longer going to have a chart and a map report snippet. You're now going to have a layout field, and that's what is contained in it, is the chart and the map together. Again, you're going to take all of these fields, so now you have your layout, your header, your footer, your table, and you're going to lay it out vertically, and now you've got your header, your layout, your table, and the bottom, the footer. Okay. The render tool, this is sort of the last bit here, and then we'll get into really building the workflow. The render tool allows you to output to a variety of different temporary outputs. You can also output to a specific file. You can group data into separate reports. If you're going to do that, you need to set an output directory. So you cannot output to separate reports using the temporary option. It has to be an actual location. You're going to declare what field contains all of those report snippets have now been consolidated. By the time you get to the render tool, all the relevant report snippets that you've been working with that are together for your one report need to be consolidated into a single report snippet. Typically, it's going to be a layout. So you choose that field, and you can choose to use additional snippets as headers or footers. So you could use the header and footer tool, or you can create your own. And then just declare them that you want them here. You can choose to show it on the first page or not if that's relevant. And then finally, you can change your paper size and whatnot. Okay, so let's get into the designer portion of this. So what I have here is a, get this stuff out of the way. Okay, so what you have here is a workflow that's been done in terms of data prep. So we're all done with the data prep portion of this. We can look at the starting data. We have store names, the address, basic location data, all their sales data for all these months, including a total value and their physical location, a spatial object that represents their location. So all we're going to do is we're going to sort this total by descending, take the first 5, so those are our top performers. And we're going to, so here's our first 5. We're going to pivot those using a transpose. And we're going to just get this. So now that we have, we're basically creating our line graph sales. So by, we're going to keep that sales data, and we're going to use the store address, city, state, zip as your key field. So it's just going to give you the store with January's data, again the store with February's data, again the store. And so it's just keeping that all together in one line. Here we are renaming those fields we just created. So name 2, which was created by that month, is now called name 2. We don't want that. We want to call that month. And value is sales. So we're changing that with the select tool. We're going to pivot that back. So we're just grouping it by month. Our new column names are name and sales. And that's going to give us the month. It's going to give us each of these stores as our header, because we chose the name field. And it's going to give us sales for each of those stores. So we're prepping our data here. Do a little date time parsing here just to get the month. So this gives us the order for our data. So April is the 4th month of the year, August the 8th month, and so on. That's why that step is in there. And now we just sort ascending. So we're sorting that order ascending. Now we're ready to put stuff into reporting tools. So we're going to go ahead and bump over to reporting. And what we're going to do here is build our line graph. So we're going to bring that charting tool in. And we're going to configure it. Now in this case, I know we want a line chart. And I'm going to set this up so that I can have all 5 of my series, right? So I want all creatures great and small. I want fins and feathers. So all we're doing is just plotting these lines on the chart. And you can see it popping up here in the preview. Mutt Hut, Petland, pets and stuff, and that's it. So now we have all of those put together. We're going to go ahead and label it by month. And we're going to give this a nice little title. We're going to call it monthly sales. And we're going to set this width to 5 inches and 3 inches. And this is just to fit on our page when we're done here. Okay. Maybe shrink the title size down a little bit. 14 can be a little big. And for the purpose of this, I'm just going to leave it alone. Now it's important, you're probably used to being able to click on the output anchor of any tool and see the browse anywhere data. When you're looking at report snippets, it's important to use a browse tool to actually see your data. Without a browse tool, all you're going to see is this report snippet. So what I've done is I've consolidated all 12 records across those 14 fields into a single report snippet. So you see that here. Doesn't really give me much to look at until I click on the browse tool, and now I can see I have my legend, I have my values, I have my table, everything looks reasonably well. One other thing that I want to do, I don't particularly like the way my legend looks there, so we'll come to legend. I do want to show it as a legend, and I want to position it in the bottom. So it's going to just drop it down underneath. Okay, so now we've built our first chart. We're going to move over here to the pie chart. So again, we're going to bring down a chart tool. And we are going to configure this as a pie chart. Come over here, select pie. And this time we're going to display our percentage sales, which is what we've created here. Now you'll see some little data wizardry going on here. All we're doing here is saying we're taking those first 5 records, and in this tool here, the summarize tool, what we're doing is we're just taking a sum of those sales, of all sales across all 5 of those stores, so that we know what the total sales is and what percentage each of those 5 stores makes. So we're going to append that total to all 5 records. So there's a new field coming out of this tool that is just total sales across those 5 stores, and it's going to be used in this formula tool to give us the percent sales. It's a basic calculation, total divided by all sales. So we're going to come over here. We're going to choose percent sales. For label, we want to choose name because we want to see that pet store name associated with each of their slice of the pie. And again, knowing the page limitations, we want to do 5 and 3. I've been known to, in the past, take a ruler to a page so that I know for sure how much space I have to play with each of my report snippets. And just for consistency, we'll do 10. And also, we'll go ahead and put that legend on the bottom. So now we're staying consistent between the 2 displays that I had going on there. So here we go. Yikes. So I have a tiny little store here. I have a tiny little chart here. Let's take a look at what we did. Bear with me just a moment. I have it set to 5 and 3. That should be pretty good. Title size. No grouping. Legend looks good. Let's just run that one more time. This is interesting. Not that the DPI should change anything for us. No, it didn't. In fact, it made it smaller. I'm not sure why our display here, because I actually have this open in 2 separate screens. And on one screen, it is the appropriate size. And on this screen, it is not. Well, for the sake of demonstration, we may have to move on and troubleshoot this later if it continues to be a problem when we get to the very end. So let's keep this moving, and when we get to the end, I want to make sure we have time to display kind of everything else. There's occasions where the render in the browse tool can be a little wonky. So I will, I'll move on for now and we'll come back. All right, so now I want to bring in a basic table tool. And I'm going to take this data straight from here. It's great to not have to reinvent the wheel. You know, you can pull data in from anywhere in the workflow. I'm going to bring in my table tool. And all I want to see in this table tool is I want to see name. And I'm just going to go ahead and deselect everything else, with the exception of total sales. Okay. I'm choosing percentage. So what this is going to do is it's going to fit to however much space it's given on the page. I have my data represented the way that I want it to. And I'm going to go ahead and change name to something that looks a little more attractive. We're going to call it store name. I'm going to choose to align it to the left because I think that looks nicer. And I'm going to go down to my total sales. And as I said before, I'll give it that prefix because I know it's a value. I want it to be aligned to the right because, again, I think that just looks nice for what we're trying to do here. And if we add a browse after that and run it, we're going to see store name total, and we have our representation pretty much the way we want it. Okay. So now we want to, now we've built a table, 2 charts. Let's take a look at the map function. So report map. I'm going to bring that down. And in this particular case, there's a lot of data that I just don't need for the report map tool. So I'm going to choose to add a select tool. Connect it here. We'll bump this over because we're going to pull from the same spot that we pulled for the pie chart. I'm going to choose to deselect pretty much everything. Options, select, deselect highlighted fields, with the exception of spatial object and the location data. Okay. Now that we're here, it's important to point out the value of naming your actual data streams. Now, in this particular example, I've only got one spatial object going into the report map tool. However, if you do have a situation where you have more than one, it gets really confusing really easily because all you have are these numbered data streams coming in here. So I'm going to go ahead and call this stores, and you're going to see where that's represented inside the report tool, the report map tool. Some basic configuration here. I want an 8x3 map. That'll fit nicely on my page and show me what I want. I'm going to choose Carto. That's our web-based map server. Everybody who has Alteryx should have access to Carto. You won't have any issues pulling that down. And I'm going to go ahead and leave the expand extent to the default. So the data tab is a list, it's a comprehensive list of all the data streams with spatial objects that are currently connected to the report tool. This is where you would see number 1, number 2, number 3 if you had 3 separate data streams that are not named coming in here. That's why it's important, if you name that data stream, it will show up here in this list intuitively. Now, I want to theme these stores so they're easier to see. So I'm going to go ahead and theme it on name, and I'm going to label it on name. This is simply telling Alteryx that when I display spatial objects from this field, I want them to be color-coded and I want them to be labeled. Now we're going to go to the Layers tab. There are fundamental layers packaged with Alteryx, base layers, points, lines, polygons. These are roads, state parks, churches, buildings, lakes, whatever you have in there are all represented here. I'm just going to choose to represent these points layers as points. And we have a lot of freedom here to play around with what is represented. In this case, I want to change my point style to a circle. So I can click here and I can say circle. If you have a custom image that you would like, so say you work for a brick and mortar retail organization and you want to label Walmarts with their logo, you can certainly do that. We'll come down to outline color. We'll just say black. I think black is fine. Here in the label, we have lots of different configurations. If you have some standards that you like to apply to your maps, you can certainly do that. Change your font size, font position, etc. We can also go to the theme, and this is where we are going to declare how we want our unique stores to be represented. Now, in this case, I want unique values, so it's going to look at each one of those 5 stores and color them uniquely. I don't want a ramp. I just want to go with a map, and then I can choose from any one of these sets. There's a great knowledge base article in the community on how to create your own custom unique color ramps. So you can check that out too if you so desire. So all I've done here is just chosen a particular unique color spectrum that I want to display. Now the last thing that I'm going to do here, as I said before, was the use of the legend. It's defaulted to layout to the right, which means you're going to have this extra rectangle hanging off your map like a tail that creates a lot of negative space above it. So I choose to lay out my legend as a separate field. So when I do that, what you're going to see is a map. You have the color coded for the stores. The colors don't actually correspond with anything other than to make them look clear, that stand out as different locations. You have the labels, and you have a separate field here called legend, completely separate field. Okay. So now we have put together quite a bit of reporting snippets that are all just kind of floating around at the moment. So we want to start bringing things together. Now, the first thing you notice that these 2 charts that I created relatively small in terms of width. So I'm going to use a join tool because it's important to keep your report snippets together on the same row. In this particular case, I am only building one report here, so I'm not doing a group by function. So I can choose to join by record position. If I was grouping and I had 10 stores and I had 10 charts coming out of here and 10 charts coming out of here, I would choose to join by specific fields, and I would use that grouping field to do that join. In this case, I'm not doing that, so join by record position is sufficient. So at this point, when you run it, you will see now that I have a single row with the chart, and in this case, the right chart. So this is going to be my pie chart, and the left chart is my line graph. And I'm going to choose to bring in my layout tool. And I'm going to connect that to the join side. And I want to position these side by side. So it's a lot. I think of it in terms of Legos. You know, I think that that's a relatively straightforward explanation of what we're doing. Let's see. The left chart is our line chart. We can rename things here. It makes it a little easier to understand what we're doing. So when I click on here, you see those 2 are missing because I just renamed it. So we can just go ahead and uncheck that. I want my line chart to the left. I want my pie chart to the right. If I wanted to flip this around, I simply just bump the pie chart up. The pie chart will now appear on the left, and the line chart will appear on the right. Horizontal percentage, this is all fine. I'm going to leave this alone because I'm not setting any particular widths here that matter. But I am going to set my alignment to the top. Center is fine. And again, to the top. This is just going to make sure the 2 report snippets are aligned across their top axis. So at the output of this, you'll see I've gone from 2 report snippets down to a single layout. The next part I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring in a join multiple. This is a really useful tool. So I'm going to take that report snippet that I just created. I'm going to take that layout report snippet that I just created. I'm going to create my table. I'm going to bring in my map tool. Oh, and let's create a header too. So we bring down a report text tool. I'm going to create a new field for this. And I'm going to choose to bring in an image. Let's see, where is it? Don't appear to have my image handy. Well, you can navigate to an image there, and then let's just say Alteryx Inc. for now. I can't find that image. Live demonstrations, always prone to some occasional snafus. We're going to select that, make it a bold. Let's come down here, and for special tags, I'll drop a horizontal line in here. Okay, that kind of makes it look nice and pretty. Relatively straightforward. You could choose to bring in really whatever you want, and just pass that downstream. So now that I have this header, I am going to connect my header to my join multiple. I'm going to choose to join by record position because I don't have a common field across all the components. That layout is my line/pie chart. The table is my table. The text is my title. And the map, I forgot a step here. I told you all I was going to talk about the overlay. So I'm going to bring in an overlay and drop it in here. I set my map, and in the lower right-hand corner, I want my legend. That's going to change the way this looks. You'll now see that I no longer have a map entry. I have an overlay entry. So I'm just going to rename it map. That makes more sense. It's easier to see what I'm doing. And finally, we're going to bring in a layout tool. This last layout tool is what's going to allow me to take those Legos and build myself a wall. So I've taken these two Legos and pushed them side by side. Now they're ready to join the rest of the Legos and be stacked vertically into a nice rectangle. So I'm going to change this from horizontal to vertical. And I'm going to align these intuitively. I want my title on top. I want my line and pie chart next. I want my map next, and now I want my table next. And this is just these are arbitrary decisions that I made when I decided that I wanted to make my report look in a particular way. Finally, we'll bring in our render tool. In this case, I'm going to go to temporary PDF document. I only have one report snippet coming out here. So if I click to run here, you'll see that after this join multiple tool, I have one record that now has 4 relevant report snippets plus a bounding rectangle. The map tool always gives you a bounding rectangle, which is simply just a physical polygon with coordinates in the corners that illustrate exactly the area that the map represents. But that's a topic for another training. And then what we'll do is we'll run that through the layout tool, and that consolidated all of those report snippets into a single one. So we come to the render tool because we are now down to one report snippet that's relevant for us. I could have chosen to not bring the header in here and then done another join to join the layout with the header, and then over here I can then declare that I want that header to be the header. Or, in this case, I've made the decision to go ahead and use fewer tools, join everything together, create the layout as it is, and go ahead and output it. So what we'll see now is this PDF. It comes out like this. And again, I am not sure why this is happening because I have one of the members of the training team is also listening, and she's kind of following along and has not been able to replicate the shrinky issue. I do know that sometimes WebEx does strange things when we're trying to present. So I'm going to chalk it up to that because I have another screen open right now that's not causing me that problem. In fact, I will click on that render from the other workflow, and you'll see this looks great. So we have about 10 minutes left. Feel free to type in any questions or comments. If you'd like me to display something into the chat, I'm happy to explain something or dig into something a little bit more deeply. Give folks a moment to type any questions they might have. Somebody just asked, on the graph, do I have my numbers and names flip-flopped? So we're talking about the graph here. So I'm looking to have, my x-axis is my months, my value is my y-axis. I could choose to flip that. In this particular exercise, when I built this report charting tool, I chose as my series the stores. So it's going to give me those stores. And I chose my label field as month. So that's going to give the label field here is going to be labeling my x-axis. I could choose to flip that. But I would need to do a little data prep first to get it back into the right position. Can I insert text boxes and add commentary to the graph? That's a good question. Not easily is kind of my response to that. We can, oops. So if you're talking about like adding some text boxes here or here, we could do that. We would need to bring in a report text tool, like we've done down here, and then create whatever information that we want to create, and then do a join, like we've done here, so that you have the text report snippet associated with the chart, and then you can do an overlay. So you can tell it where about on this report snippet do you want that text to appear. So you can, but again, it's kind of how you approach it with respect to the report text tool and the overlay. And the pie chart. Or the axis is switched on the pie chart. Meaning, should we have the stores represented and then have the numbers down here? That's an easier fix. Since I just have a single thing here, I could choose percent sales. And my legend. Yeah, I had taken the name out from this one. I mean, it's kind of in how you choose to prep your data. In this particular case, I didn't prep my data in a way that really allows me to do that. I don't think my axes are switched in this particular case because I do want to display exactly what percentage it is. And then if you zoom in, the color codes are relevant. So I know Petland is 19% and Pets and Stuff is 16.2. That's what I was going for, at least in this particular layout. It may not have been clear too because I wasn't zooming in here. that these were particularly color-coded to associate. Is there a way to middle vertically aligned field names in a table? For instance, some field names are 2 lines long, while others are only 1 line long. Adjusted. The latter are adjusted on the top. So that's where we're talking about kind of multiple entries here. So you've got 1 line followed by another line, part of the header. You want them to be middle aligned. Correct me if I'm not understanding that correctly. Yes, there is a way to do that. It takes a little bit of massaging. We do have an article, I'm pretty sure that I cover this in one of the articles that I've written for the knowledge base. It's a little bit tricky when you're talking about multi-row, single cell values. It can be done, but it takes a little bit of doing. And like I said, I have that in an article, I'm pretty sure. If not, you can always feel free to comment on this particular training, and I can see if I can find that for you. I have about 3 minutes left here if anybody has any more questions they'd like to ask. Column subheadings, that's a great question. That's something that has been asked in the past. I would recommend you add that to the Idea Center or check and see if there's already that request and give it a star. Those are the types of things that dev likes hearing about, our development team likes to hear about. I think it's certainly a worthwhile thing to have. Again, there's an article that I have that kind of talks a little bit about subheadings, so you can check and see how I've managed to use Alteryx to work around that, but it is not currently in product. Can you input color themes from graphs and charts? So do you want to declare your own color themes? Let me show you. One thing that you can do is, so I have this color palette here. I can choose, let's see, I'm going to go into the map tool. I think this still works. Theme. I'm going to do Control-C because I have this theme selected. It's the map theme. I'm going to come back to my pie chart and go to here. That function doesn't quite work as well as I'd like it to anymore. What you can do, so there's a couple of different things that you can do, especially if you have custom colors for your organization. So say, let's say you're McDonald's and you want red to represent your stores, and I don't know what color. I'm struggling to think of other corporate color schemes, but let's say for the sake of argument that Taco Bell's purple. You could technically come into the XML and you can declare your own color ramp. So here's my series palette. I would choose the hexadecimal values and I could enter that directly into the XML. Now, in order to make that change, you would go to Options, User Settings, Edit User Settings, and you can go to Advanced and choose Display XML Properties in Window. And what that does is it provides you with this little icon here, and that allows you to see the XML behind the scenes in this particular tool. Now, this is kind of a buyer beware thing. If you mess up the XML in here and it breaks the tool, you want to make sure that perhaps you do your testing on a separate tool so that you don't break your tool. It won't break the tool forever. It'll just break that particular one that you're working on. But here's the XML for the color ramp in this tool right now. If I choose to change that and I sort my data, so McDonald's is first, and this is McDonald's red, and this is, let's say, Taco Bell purple, it will color code those things accordingly. How can you output information from multiple menus? This came up when I was trying to output variable importance for the decision tree tool, but it only pulled the first menu item. I'm not sure. 3 tabs from the output. Summary. I'd have to see exactly what's being worked on here. 3 tabs from the output. When you're talking about writing the predictive tools, they have some dynamic reporting, they have some static report snippets that come out, and then they have some raw data that come out. I'd have to see exactly what it is that you're doing in order to kind of answer that more fully. Okay, well, we've reached our hour. I want to thank everybody for attending. Hopefully this answered some questions on how to approach your general reporting design and make it a little bit easier. Like I said, I like to think of these in terms of Legos, these report snippets. It allows you to conceptualize it a little bit more rather than feeling a little overwhelmed with all these little pieces floating around. But with proper preparation, some fundamental organizational skills, you should be able to put together some pretty nice looking reports in a relatively short period of time. Always feel free to reach out to Alteryx support. Should you have any questions, we have the community. You can always check out that. Alteryx Academy has great training material as well as these weekly sessions. And then support, you can reach out support@alteryx.com, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Thanks again, everybody, for attending.